The first time I saw her, she was standing in our marble foyer like she didn't belong there, but somehow she did. Back then, my daughter Emily was 8, pale as the winter sky and fading in ways I didn't want to admit. The doctors had no name for it, just a pile of bills and warnings to keep her stress low. I was running Lawson Holdings from a tower in Chicago, wearing suits that cost more than most people's cars and keeping my grief locked up tight since my wife died. I told the staff no unnecessary interaction with Emily. She needed rest, not distractions. Or maybe I needed the distance. The new maid's name was Grace Coleman. The agency said she had great references. Mrs. Benton, our longtime house manager, gave her the drill in that sharp, condescending tone she saved for the help. Clean the rooms, don't talk to the boss, don't bother the child. And Grace just nodded, polite smile, hands clasped. But there was this warmth in her eyes that caught me off guard, like she saw straight through the ice. 2 hours later, I came home early for a conference call and heard something I hadn't heard in months: laughter. Not the polite, faint chuckle Emily sometimes gave me, but the deep, unstoppable kind that makes your eyes water. I followed the sound, and there she was, sitting up in bed, her cheeks pink, while Grace sat beside her reading from Treasure Island, with the worst pirate accent I'd ever heard. "Where be me treasure, ye scurvy dog?" Grace growled, scratching at an imaginary beard. Emily squealed, "Do the parrot!" And Grace flapped her arms, screeching, "Pieces of 8! Captain needs a bath!" I just stood there, frozen, because my little girl looked alive. When Grace spotted me, her smile faded and she stood up like she'd been caught stealing. "Mr. Lawson, I was just—" "It's fine," I said, a little too stiff. "Just remember, she needs her rest." Emily's face dimmed. I left the room feeling like I'd just shut a window on the first ray of sunlight we'd had in years. Over the next weeks, I noticed things. Emily's tea served in a china cup I hadn't seen since my wife used it. Little paper cranes on her windowsill. Stories about the cardinal building a nest in the oak outside. And every time I tried to thank Grace, she'd brush it off. "Just doing my job, sir." Mrs. Benton didn't like it. She cornered Grace in the kitchen one afternoon. I happened to be walking in just in time to hear, "You're playing on his grief, using that poor child to work your way into this family." Grace's voice was velvet over steel. If making a sick little girl smile is opportunistic, then I guess I'm guilty. But this isn't about position. It's about kindness, something this house could use more of. I fired Benton a month later. She'd rather keep the place polished than let my daughter live. Then came the night of the storm. Grace had already left for the day, but she came back for her umbrella. Emily was upstairs, crying, terrified, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Grace didn't hesitate. She held her, rocked her, hummed some old lullaby until the sobs faded. When I found them, Emily was curled against her asleep. Grace looked up, whispered, "She hates storms." Her mum passed during one. Something in my chest cracked open. "Stay," I told her. "Guest room's free, just in case she needs you again." I didn't even realise I'd used her first name. Grace had her own storms. Her mum needed surgery insurance wouldn't cover. She wouldn't ask for help, but I noticed the worry in her eyes. I raised her pay. She said it was too much. I said, "It's not enough." But trouble found us anyway. My business partner Crawford showed up waving tabloids pictures of me and Grace at a hospital when her mum's condition got worse. Headlines calling her a gold digger. Investors calling for her head. Crawford said, "Fire her or you'll tank the company." "Say that again," I warned. "You're letting a maid ruin everything." I threw him out. Grace tried to quit that night. They're saying awful things to Emily in her online class. "You're investors. Let them walk," I said. "They're not worth more than you or my daughter." Emily must have been listening from the hallway because she came in holding a rabbit like a shield. Families don't leave each other when things get hard, right? Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Right, baby." That was the moment she stayed. Then Emily collapsed. Fever spiking, breathing shallow. Grace called the doctor, stayed up all night, cooling her forehead, whispering prayers. I was across the country, caught a red-eye pacing that plane, like it could make it go faster. When I walked in at dawn, Grace just said, "She's going to be okay." And I realised if she hadn't been here, maybe my little girl wouldn't be. In the weeks that followed, Grace's past came out. Her father, framed by a businessman named Pierce, had died in prison. She'd given up everything to care for her family. I had resources. I had reach. So I told her we're clearing his name. We dug, found the trail, gave it to a journalist who'd been circling for years. It blew up. Pierce arrested Grace's father, exonerated. Those same investors who'd turned their backs, suddenly calling to rebuild the partnership. I ignored them. Around that time, Emily's doctor said there was an experimental treatment overseas, expensive, long-term, no guarantee. I didn't blink. We go. All of us. Grace hesitated, worried about appearances. Emily solved it in one sentence. We go as a family. Stop pretending you don't love each other. We spent 6 months in Switzerland. Emily got stronger. Grace and I stopped dancing around what was obvious. When the doctor said the word remission, Emily actually ran through the garden. We stood there laughing and crying like fools. I sold the mansion when we came back, bought a brownstone in a regular neighborhood, started a foundation in Grace's father's name, asked her to marry me in the backyard with Emily tossing rose petals and declaring herself maid of honor. Not everyone approved. Some whispered I'd lost my edge, traded billions for some maid with a tragic backstory, but they don't see what I see. The nights Emily sleeps without coughing because Grace is in the next room. The way the house smells like cookies and sounds like music instead of silence. The way I finally know what it's like to come home to more than walls. So tell me what's worth more, protecting an image built on other people's approval, or building a life where you're exactly where you're needed with the people who see you for who you really are. I know my answer. What's yours?